Good evening. Welcome to Earth to the Other Side. My name is John Glasspool. I'm your host, and tonight I'm speaking with Lura. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
My
And
pleasure.
this is something that I've written about and finally talked about, but for 30 years I was silent. I'm going to preface my near-death experience and take you back to 1972 when I was 12 years old. I was a horse-crazy kid, still am a horse-crazy adult. I went horseback riding at a local stable, and they put me on a horse that was just way, way too much for kid, and the horse took off with me, couldn't stop it, stayed on, managed to stay on. The horse ran up to the highway, and the hooves hit that hot tar pavement, just like hitting black ice. The horse flipped in the air, and just before I was crushed between the horse and the pavement, I went out of body. I was slingshot behind my body and about 6 feet from the ground and very parallel to myself. I saw the back of my wavy hair, and my vision was much, much clearer than my 20/20 vision that I have in, physical reality here. So I was seeing everything so clearly, and I could make out my hair and the little green tank top my mother had just made me, and my brand new blue jeans, and even the dried out pine needles in the nearby trees. And it was like swoosh right back in my body as the horse was coming down on top of me, and we were sliding across the highway. It was a terrible, horrific accident. And I went out of body, and boy, I went right back in to feel every amount of pain you can imagine with compound fractures of the knee and the ankle and the leg. It was so shocking to be out of body that almost distracted me from the tragedy, that I was living. The horse got up, and everybody's always asked me when I've told them. They're all worried about the horse, not the poor kid that got smushed. But the horse recovered. The horse was fine. Horse was pretty banged up, but she recovered. I got up and hopped on one leg back to the barn because nobody came for me. Nobody came to help me. The employees rushed out and got the horse, and I was forgotten. But what I could never forget was that I left my body just before this accident. And I couldn't talk about it because it was too shocking. And I was afraid that somebody would call me a liar or an exaggerator or something like that. I couldn't even tell my own mom for many years. And that was my first out-of-body experience.
That's incredible and scary.
I was not hysterical when the whole thing was happening. I was very calm because I was in shock. And I went into deep shock after the accident. So there weren't tears or panic or hysteria. It's just that my body got very cold, even though it was 96 degrees out. And I went into deep shock afterwards, yeah.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. And so did you discuss this with anyone, with your parents or family?
Later, I got up the courage to talk about it. But no, I came from a very middle-class, practical family. And, things like this would be in the category of UFOs and Bigfoot in my family. So I couldn't talk about it, but it haunted me. It haunted me as a teenager.
Had you ever heard of any other instances of out-of-body experiences? Had you been on the lookout for anything like that?
No, this was 1972. And for anybody that was born afterwards, it was a different world back then. There was no internet. There was no discussion about the paranormal, because if you talked about the paranormal, you were considered, a freak or on drugs or something. There was no open mind, nobody was open-minded to anything that was like this. I wanted to talk to my minister because I liked him a great deal, and people in the church were very nice. My accident was horrific. But I did recover because I had this fabulous Cuban doctor who saved me from skin grafts, and a mom and dad that really worked with me to get me walking again. So, um, 6 months later, I wanted to go horseback riding again.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time during the accident, so when you were out of body, you said you sort of had a parallel experience where you experienced the out of body part, and at the same time being right next to your body, right? Like, did
Yes.
you
I mean,
feel the pain and
but
separation from the pain?
the real me was out of body, and my physical body looked like a shell. And I also did not have visual perception in that split second. All my perception was out of body, that doesn't feed back from behind the back of the horse and myself in the saddle. So yeah.
Yeah, and prior to your next um, incident, the NDE, did you have anything in between? Any more out of body experiences in between, or was that it?
Nothing paranormal. Nothing paranormal. But can I tell you something that even was before this?
Yeah.
Uh, my grandmother and my mom didn't tell me till I was like 24 or 5. I know 24, I believe. About my this thing that happened when I was a little kid. I had pneumonia as a baby, and I guess went into respiratory distress or whatever, had 105-degree fever. And, my sister said my legs were stiff as a board and I was beet red. So I had some sort of life-threatening pneumonia as an infant that I came back from, I was resuscitated from. I didn't, my mother was an RN and she was working on me in the house. This is all I found out, but it was very life or death for about 10 minutes. I think that was a factor. I don't know, but I think there was a factor, nearly dying as an infant. But as a little toddler, I have a vague recollection, but the story goes that I had an imaginary friend that would come to me when I was trying, in my crib. And I had a name for it. And I would start talking to somebody. So my mom and my grandmother were very curious. And so they stayed up one night. And I guess I popped awake around 1 a.m. and tried to share my little lamb toy with my little visitor. And and they when I was a little older, because this would happen, and sometimes I'd be upset, and they'd ask me, have you seen your friend, your little tutu friend? And no, no, no. Then every once in a while I'd say yes. And one day my grandmother was just curious, so she asked me, what did this friend look like? And I was very surprised they didn't know him. And I put my hands up in the air and I said, ball people. And,
Oh, people.
ball people, like they came in like in a
Orbs.
gliding in a ball or an orb. Like you call it an orb today, but a child, 3-year-old, isn't that articulate? It was ball people. So I've always thought that was weird, but I was wondering if that, souls come into children who are a little bit more receptive. That's always been an idea. I kind of ran with that and put it in one of my novels.
I
But
also think that because you had the earlier, possibly near-death experience, that could have opened up certain channels and doors to the other side that you just sort of stuck with you.
yeah, yeah, um, quite possibly.
And I think that's what's happened to me, and I've heard this from several other people as well, NDEers as well, that I've spoken to over the years. I think it's a thing. Once you kind of open that little, whatever you want to call it, you sort of have one foot in, one foot out.
Yes, yes, I think so. But nothing psychically happened to me as a little kid. After just that incident with the imaginary friend or whoever it was. And then I had my out of body experience at 12. Then, years went by, nothing happened. Then I had the big accident at 19. I went out to Centerville, Virginia, to a place I used to ride a lot at. And Took a horse out that was above my abilities and was riding for, I don't know, an hour or so, and met up with some people on the trail. We decided to have the great, bright idea to race our horses back to the barn. Not a good thing. I was wearing a helmet and boots. I knew how to ride. I was going very fast on this horse, and the horse stumbled, and I went flying, I went airborne into a ditch with rocks, head first. And as I was leaving, I was tilting off to my right side. I knew I was going to fall. You know that, I mean, I've gone over the jump without the horse a few times myself. So this time I was like, that dread. I knew it was going to happen. You just take these risks when you ride horses. And I never hit the ground because I left my body, John, and went into this pit, this dark tunnel at a very high rate of speed. I had no sensation of my physical body hitting the ground, which I'm very glad about. I'm glad to miss that one. But this was my near-death experience, my pivotal moment in my life, the moment that changed everything. Because afterwards, all my perspective, my whole foundation of what reality was turned upside down, and my core beliefs shifted. So it was a great blessing. I wish I could have skipped the injuries, but I went out of body into this tunnel, and then the most wonderful thing on earth happened. I was reunited with my late grandfather, Papa, and he didn't have any of the ravages of cancer that had taken his life when I was 12. He was just as loving and fantastic there as he had been. And there was no, even though it had been a few years since he died, there was no, his love for me hadn't diminished. It had only strengthened. And our bond had only gotten stronger, as weird as it sounds. But he was just the most wonderful person on earth to me. He was my biggest hero. So talking about him, I have to control what I say because I do tend to cry. He was a great guy, and to see him gave me wonderful comfort. And as distressed as I was, because I was, when I was going through the dark tunnel, because, I was 19 years old. I had like 2 boyfriends at the time. And I had a cool job working at a nightclub, my own apartment, my own crappy car. I was, independent, and life had just gotten interesting. I was just having a good time being I can say it now, a pretty girl with a lot of attention and just having fun. So to lose that was like a tremendous core grief that you have when you feel like you have lost your opportunity to live when life was just getting good. But what was so beautiful was there was my grandfather. And it was worth it to lose it all, to be with him. And then there was a turn of events I didn't really care for. People call it your life review. I call it, I don't have a better word for it, but you get to see the results of your actions in this life. And you're your own judge. This isn't like any biblical thing. I didn't have a religious epiphany while dead. What I had, and it wasn't a punishment, it was an enlightenment where you go and you go through these actions of your life feeling, you can feel the other person's point of view. Someone you've hurt you really hurt their feelings. You feel what they feel. And even though I was 19 and I wasn't a serial killer or anything, or a bad kid, it's the selfish or the stupid things you do when you're young that you wish you had. The nightly thing you say to your mom, the petty thing you treat a friend with, it was kind of brutal. I mean, it was to me because I never wanted to hurt anybody. And I try to think of myself as a good person. And well, we all fall short. Let me say that. So I went through all of these things, and I was only 19, but it seemed to be a lot of stuff. And things that stood out that I had done good or done right seemed very small to me, but were very big there. Like rescuing a kitten that I did. It had been thrown from a car, and of course, like a dumb teenager, I ran out of traffic and got it. All right. So that was big, and I didn't realize it was big. I just thought that was really, really dangerous later on. Just a lot of things like that. A kid that was bullied that I kind of stuck up for, that I should have stuck up for more, but did my best. The biggest message I got, and I want to explain something. I didn't do it, but when you interfere in somebody's destiny, okay, let's say you're the husband that has belittled his wife for years and she just is a crushed soul. That is a big no-no. That is the big taboo. When you mess up somebody's destiny, or you're the drunk that, hits a kid and makes the kid paralyzed for life, or you do something that really messes up an innocent person's destiny, that is like huge. That's huge. It's more than you could ever imagine. Not so much a sin as a bad thing. And of course, it's bad for us here, but it's even bigger over there. And you get the bill for all of your actions that weren't good. And it's to learn, but it's still kind of brutal.
What was your position on the afterlife before all of this happened, before the near-death experience happened?
Well, I was a minister's granddaughter who went to church, sang in the choir, went to Bible school. I mean, just a whole lot of church. Where I still call myself a recovering Presbyterian. I have Judeo-Christian ethics. Yes, I really do, John. And regardless of my near-death experience, Judeo-Christian ethics. I was never a big believer, never really digested the literal sense of the Bible. I thought it was a way to, I don't know, I'll get like bad emails if I really tell the truth. I thought, when
No,
Emperor
this is a forum, a platform. You can say whatever you want
Okay.
as long as it's not
Okay.
offensive.
I really, when I study history, and I really was interested in history as a young teenager. Emperor Constantine chose Christianity in order to control people. That's what he pushed Christianity, because he was a good controller. Most religions are pretty much, they're in the control business. Do I believe I believe the message of the Bible? Yes. Do I believe the literal Bible? Not so much. And after my near-death experience, kind of not at all. So please don't send me hate mail.
The underlining message, I think, of the Bible is really, Jesus's message, at least, was to love, right?
Kindness.
It's all about love.
Love, generosity.
Generosity. And I think, based on my experiences and the people that I've spoken with,
Yeah.
I feel like it's the entire mission is about love. Yeah.
Well, it was a big wake-up call having my life review, or the review of my actions. I look at it now at 63 very differently than I did at 19. At 19, I was a mess. So when I came out of this thing and I'm talking to my grandfather, I just said, it's been so long. The experience felt so long, even though it happened all at once, if that makes sense. Linear time is not the same there as it is here. There is no time. That's the place of no time. These were hard for a 19-year-old to digest. So I did not do well with my life review at all. And then as I'm, wanting comfort from him, it's like swoosh, that traveling through layers. And what a rush, man. Nobody tells you when you travel and you go through these dense layers and they get lighter and lighter and more thought responsive, how absolutely cool that part feels. And then I Then I experienced going to Source, and Source was the jackpot. I think as far as any human being can go and then ever come back. It's the ultimate, but I'm sure there's something more after that. So basically, I've been asked before, what is Source? Is this heaven? It's you're floating in a sea of love with other souls I could not visualize, like wrapping love like a warm blanket around me. It was bliss, calm. It was cloud-like. Now, was it really cloud-like, or was this how my mind interpreted it? It was bright white, but there was no sun, but it wasn't a blinding light, but it was the ultimate. And just floating in that sea of love, and then just accepting it, and then it's over, and I'm just swoosh, pulled back to the next explanation lesson, or whatever you call it. Okay. And would you like to share my hypothesis about what Source was?
I would love to. Yeah.
Looking at it through my 63-year-old brain with a lot of mileage, is when you're in Source, it is just your origin, perhaps. Perhaps it's your origin, where the starting point, and all of the souls that are around you could be parts of yourself, meaning past life personalities. I'll explain a little bit more. There could be other souls in there with you that are part of your soul group or something that are giving you love. I don't know. I didn't get the instruction book when I was there. So, but after that experience was over, I was standing outside this great chamber or hall, and I had somebody who was taking me there. So there was a guide behind me that I just couldn't make out. So this is what happened next. Is I'm standing outside this great chamber, and it's big and it's long, and I can see it in front of me. I can see the earth to the right, and it looks like a big blue ball. And I know that I'm not in physical reality, but I'm having a glimpse of something. Now, I hate heights, always have, always will, and I wasn't scared of heights, so that was nice. And I calmed myself. I said, gee, and my first name's Janice. I said, gee, Janice, at least you're not afraid of heights. And I remember thinking that. And then there was somebody guiding me behind me into the side that I couldn't make out who they were, but they weren't my grandfather. So I walked through this hall, and someone is telling me, these are your past life personalities. And there was a row of men, like in a line, and there was a row of women in a line. I was standing in the center, and just the idea that I'd been a male just blew my mind, because I'm a chicky chick, very feminine woman. So at least most of the time when I'm not on horses and cussing. So I'm seeing this row of men, and so it's just like taking your fingers over the tips of wheat when you're walking in the wheat field. That's how they were lined up. And there was I saw about 50 men, 50 women on either side. I looked in and saw one man, and he was all white. I was like, ugh, I didn't like it. And then I looked over and went over to this woman, and to think that, I'd had past lives or creeped me out, because I don't like the idea of reincarnation, still don't. And she was like, not pretty. And I thought, wow, what a disappointment this whole thing is, didn't like it, but I was taken there for a reason, to be shown that I'd done this many times. I guess I wasn't exactly a graduate or graduate material. If I keep having to repeat it, I'm flunking, Life 101. But I'd done this a lot of times. I didn't like that, but I appreciated the lesson. And then as soon as that was over, I went backwards, And only to what I can imagine now is a consensus reality. Everything's more thought receptive the further you get away from physical reality. And there's like, you can think it would be heaven, but like earth-like places. This is the best I can come up with. I'm not a great explainer of this. I know it when I learned it, but it's hard to regurgitate it because there just are not words. Because colors are brighter and different and more. Your perception of hearing is sharper and clearer. And your vision, I really appreciated that point, was like a microscope. It was so cool. My vision was so cool. And so I'm at this place. My grandfather's not there. There's the ocean, and then there's these rocks, and in the rocks there's windows that were carved out where obviously were homes for people, I imagine. And I was thinking about the Bible. I was thinking about religion for a minute, and I was thinking, gosh, you know, Jesus didn't greet me, and, there was no pearly gates, that sort of thing. And I wasn't disappointed, but, you know, in the manual of the Bible, that's what you're expecting. And all of a sudden I thought, what about the tree of life? And as I thought that, this beautiful pine tree that was probably 30 feet tall just came like at the ocean shore and was just there. And I went up to it, and it was like whitish, but like almost like a greenish moss, and some of it, the swirls were so magnificent. And I looked at this place, and it was just a big wow. And then it was over. So as soon as I perceive something and digest it, it's like I don't get a whole lot of, I don't get the tour. And I'm back with my grandfather, and I'm pretty well, I don't know, shell-shocked. It was too much for a 19-year-old to digest all of this information and shock. And it's hitting me that, I'm not going home. I'm not going back to my apartment. I'm never going to see my boyfriend again. I'm never going to see my dog. I'm never going to see my sister. I'm never going to hear music. I'm never going to go to this whole list of things, like, I had that pull back to my life somewhat. And, I just wanted to grab my grandfather's hand because he had very large hands, so to hold on to him. And I got the message that I was going back, and this layer that I was in was closer to physical reality with him. And it was a mauve color. There was no floor, but there had to be a floor, but there wasn't a floor. And then, like in my solar plexus, this pressure, just like a giant punch, and sent me backwards. And I go back into my body like with a big, big thud. And I'm there, and I look around this field, and it's bright and it's sunny, and there's a car that somebody had driven down to get me, to take me to the hospital. There's people there. This has been some time. There's people there, and I didn't feel terribly appreciative of the people that resuscitated me or brought me back, which I'm ashamed of now. But my first thought was, this is not reality, when I was looking around the field. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. And were you in agony when you came back into your body?
Oh, I hurt.
Hmm.
Oh, yes, I hurt. My nose was broken. I still got a bump here. My finger never healed right, but that was broken too. And I don't believe that there was anything that wasn't bruised. My jaw hurt. My shoulders hurt. That was a pretty, it was an aerial dive off of a horse.
I'm curious also, like, a lot of people say when they are fortunate enough to run into loved ones during a near-death experience, that those loved ones are usually presented in a much younger form. Did you experience that with your grandfather as well?
He wasn't, he looked like, Papa looked like he did when he was probably 60, when I was real little. He didn't go to being a young man, but I don't know, think I would have recognized him as a young man, but he went to
Hmm.
be the man that, that I remember from being like 5.
That
So
makes
he
sense,
didn't
though,
go,
that
yeah,
he
yeah,
would present himself, in a
yeah,
manner that you would recognize him, I guess, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your vision, your enhanced vision, was it 360 degrees, like up and down and around as well?
I don't think
Do you
so,
remember?
but it was just brighter, clearer, and, like very intense. And when I was, before I needed reading glasses, I had 20/20 vision. I thought I had excellent vision. Oh, no, you don't.
Yeah. I imagine, it must be something similar to the likes of shrimp and what is it, butterflies or some other species that can see so many more colors than us humans can.
I don't know, John. I feel very privileged that, I was able to experience this. But had this happened when I was in my 60s, I would have had a different, I didn't have any prep for this. It was just such a shock. The shell shocked feeling. I didn't do very well, and I passed out on the way to the hospital, but didn't go out of body. And then when I got to the hospital, it was terrible. The doctors were really great at first, and then I tried to tell them about what I'd seen in my grandfather, and then they asked me what drugs I'd taken, and my mom was there, and she was arguing with the doctor. It was just, um, he didn't want to admit me. He thought I was a drug addict, and it was just very, very ugly. And my mom got mad and, got me in the car. And then, right in the middle of the merit filled traffic light, I decided I wanted to go back. All of a sudden, started getting out of the car right in the middle of traffic. So I didn't calm down or really get clear for a few hours after the accident. Yeah. And then after about 12 hours, I was me again. I look at the 19-year-old girl I was, and I thought it was pretty brave of me. After a few weeks after the accident, I went to a therapist to try to talk to somebody. And she said to me, "Are we having a pity party over our broken nose?"
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
No.
Wow.
So I didn't talk about it. I mean, other than I did talk about it to my sister, my mom, and my grandmother, but I didn't talk about it to anybody else for 30 years. That's a
So
long time.
your sister, your mom, your grandmother, what sort of reaction did you get from them?
Well, my sister couldn't have been more wonderful. She was great. She was my best friend. She died a long time ago, but she was my best friend. She was totally believed me. Um, and she knew about the after effects of my near death experience, the paranormal activity afterwards, or whatever the hell you call it. Uh, she, my sister had a real psychic streak to her. And finally, when I was like 24, my grandmother sat me down and tried to explain things to me more, because I had seen my grandfather had come to me, and then I went to her, and she was dying, and I told her about it because I was the messenger or something, that he's waiting, and tried to give her comfort, which was good. And she believed me. And she said, "Well, my mother had the gift." So my grandmother was telling me all about her mother that had some psychic ability. She was able to do healings, and she was a blacksmith's wife in the 1800s, and very, very colorful stories. Well, I only wish I heard that many years before. I wouldn't have felt so isolated. But she told me things that had happened, and, with her son had it, and her mother had it, and she said, "I think you've got something like it." Well, I have to say, if people have the gift, they usually want to give it back, because it's kind of distressing in the beginning.
You had spoken to your grandmother about seeing your grandfather,
Yeah.
but when she was about to
She's
transition.
dying.
Was that the first time that you'd spoken to her about that viewing, that experience of seeing him?
Yeah, it just happened to me. I was over in Europe having a big party time. I was 25, and I was staying at this designer. He gave me his apartment. He and his girlfriend, were going out of town. They said, "Oh, you just crash here." I thought that was pretty cool. And my grandfather came to me and literally put his hand in mine. And it was so shocking because he was all white in color, but his eyes were so blue. He had like Paul Newman blue eyes, like the most electric eyes you've ever seen in a human being. He had the most beautiful eyes.
Mm.
And I talked to him, and I would have loved to say he came to see me, but he didn't. He came to see me so I could talk to my grandmother. So as soon as I got back from Paris, about a week later, I flew to my parents' place and went to see my grandmother in the nursing home and told her all about it and had a long, deep conversation about it. And she believed me. And she was very, very glad that he'd be waiting for her and not to worry and, those kind of things. She had a terrible death with a brain tumor. But
Oh.
she was a very practical, religious woman. And if these things hadn't happened in her house with her own mother, she never would have been open to it. But I'm so glad she told me the stories.
So you think you've had some shared death experiences as well?
I only had one. I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know you could have one. So as my dad was dying, I had been up for like 2 days nonstop. And I was so exhausted. I said to the nurse, I said, "I've just got to sleep. Call me if things change." I've been up as like 5 in the morning and I was exhausted. So as I'm laying down and I'm closing my eyes and I'm just, drifting off, it's like swoosh, that feeling of levity, that leaving. And it feels wonderful, like this great rush. It's nothing to fear. And suddenly I'm in a car with my dad, who's actually downstairs dying. And I'm upstairs. But suddenly we're in a car together and everything's in black and white. And it's a car that we had like in 1964. This car that had been my grandparents' car. And I just thought, boy, this car's dated, And he's driving, and I thought, oh God, we took his license. What is he doing on the road again? These are the thoughts I had. And then I realized, oh boy, wow, this isn't a dream. This is like real. So we're driving, and then we stop, and my dad gets out, and he's standing in front of me. And he has this great book. It looks about as thick as a phone book. And he said, I'm tearing up my life. I'm canceling my life. And he just took it like a real strong man and just ripped it. And the funny thing is, he looked young. He looked like 30. He wasn't ailing. He wasn't in pain. He was ready, and he was ready to go. I knew he felt bad for me because here I am arguing with him, debating, you've got to stay. I can't be alone. I just, couldn't handle, this is my last family member. And just as he did that, and he's turning and he's ready, he's going to go back. He's going away from me. I'm like swoosh back. I sat up in bed. I hear my father let out his last gasp. Sometimes that chain stoke, dying breathing is very loud.
Hmm.
And I ran downstairs, and and that was it. It's terrible to lose him, but this was his way of telling me he was okay. And the weird thing is, 2 weeks before he died, we're sitting in the living room. He's doing pretty good at that point. And I said, "Dad, would you like me to tell you the step-by-step process when you die? Would it give you some comfort?" "No, don't believe in it. Don't want to hear it." He said, "If there is life after death, it'll be a surprise." He said, "But I think I don't believe in life after death. He says, I know you have abilities. I don't want to hear them. What was really great about this is he got to show me he was okay. And I think that's why this happened.
Wow, these are great. These are great stories, great experiences. You're writing fiction books, but based on real experiences, right?
Well, what I did,
Oh, interesting.
I never thought of myself as a writer. I'm more of a storyteller, I guess. But I got compulsed to write these books because I'd had all these paranormal things happening. So all of these things are like in a pot, and after a while, the lid came out. So what I did is take a fictional story, paranormal romance, and I put in, um, basically, I tried to explain how things work, how things were opening to me. One thing I forgot to tell you during my near-death experience, that there was a lot more knowledge that was removed on my way out. I had a lot of things were taken out. So a lot of the near-death experience came back sometimes in flashbacks, which that I had for years. So, and there was such a core shift in my beliefs that all of these stories just coming out, I thought I'd do one book, and then it turned into a second book and a third book. So Near Death Connection is the first book. And I have this group of people that have all had near death experiences, and they're trying to solve a haunting situation. And so I was able to put in a lot of family folklore into these books, my love of horses and ballroom dancing and romantic men. So I had fun writing it, but I also put in, and the paranormal occurrences that happen, they're like 80% true. There's a little fiction in there, but it's basically the law, how things, the rules of the road on the other side, so to speak, from my perspective.
So, Near Death Connection, that's the first book. And what was
Yeah.
the second book?
Throwaway horses. And then
Hmm.
there's Reincarnation Connection. Uh, where my central character is trying to solve a past life murder mystery that happened during the Civil War, but it wasn't like a bodice ripper like Gone with the Wind. It was she's an intellectual. The character is an intellectual at a time when a woman's opinion meant less than nothing. So I tried to put in a lot of good storytelling, but sort of how things work as best I could, because I wanted that to be my legacy. We're here for a short period of time, and all of these experience, like, why me? John, I mean, I'm not special. I'm Miss Average, middle class, Presbyterian. Okay. So why did I get this wonderful second chance at life? Why did I don't know. So I thought, if I write these books, this will be kind of my testimony to what happened to me after I'm gone.
That's wonderful. And you've got that plus your actual experiences that you're going and talking about, which I'm sure is also part of your purpose. It's very important.
My biggest accomplishment is not really fighting this disease or writing a book or making the movie I did or anything like that. The big accomplishment that I made as Lura, I became aware in this lifetime. That is my biggest accomplishment. I became aware. I went out of body. I realized there's more than physical reality. This is not a belief. It is a fact. It is a known. And boy, it really has given me comfort to know that I've got a cheerleading squad on the other side still that actually like me. I've been very fortunate that way, and had a lot of unfortunate things, because we all get a mixed bag. It's all a big lesson, and I just believe we're born into carnage, and it's going to be tough for everybody. Well,
Well, I've
thank you
really
so
enjoyed
much for
talking to
having
you.
me.